The world is shocked by Elvis Presley's sudden death after attempts to save his life failed.
Elvis Presley died today. He was 42. Apparently it was a heart attack. He was found at his home in Memphis.
Both Yoko and Lennon went right past Chapman. They didn't suspect anything. 4 bullets hit Lennon in the back. He never even saw them coming.
Rock stars live fast, burn bright, and sometimes their stories end in the most tragic ways imaginable. Some died mysteriously, others left behind chilling final words, and a few were even murdered in cold blood. And at number 1, a death so disturbing it still haunts the music industry to this day. 20. Sid Vicious. Sid Vicious wasn't just a rock star, he was a walking disaster. His life was a whirlwind of drugs, violence, and pure rebellion. But when his girlfriend, Nancy Spungen, was found dead in a pool of blood, everything changed. Sid didn't start as a musician. He could barely play the bass, but his attitude made him the face of punk rock. As the wildest member of the Sex Pistols, he lived by one rule: chaos at all costs. Then came October 12, 1978. Nancy Spungen, his partner in crime, was found stabbed to death in New York's Chelsea Hotel. Sid was arrested but released on bail. He denied everything.
What do you know what I mean?
Do I know what you mean? About why you called it a day?
I loved Nancy, he said. But before he could stand trial, Sid was dead. A heroin overdose took him out at just 21 years old. Here's the darkest part. His mother allegedly gave him the fatal dose. Some say it was a mercy killing to stop him from going to prison. Others think Sid knew exactly what he was doing. And there's one final mystery. Was Sid actually guilty of Nancy's murder? Some believe a mysterious drug dealer was in the room that night. But the truth? We'll never know. A love story? A tragedy? A crime scene? Sid Vicious's life was all three. 19. Bon Scott. Bon Scott wasn't just the voice of AC/DC, he was its wild heart. Every night he lived like there was no tomorrow. But on one cold night in 1980, that philosophy finally caught up with him. Bon had a legendary tolerance for alcohol. He could outdrink anyone, anytime. But it wasn't just for fun. His bandmates later admitted he was drinking to escape. On February 19th, after a long night of partying, Bon passed out in a friend's car. Hours later, he was still motionless. By the time they pulled him out, it was too late. He had choked on his own vomit. AC/DC was devastated. They were already working on a new album, but now their frontman was gone. The world would never hear Bon Scott sing again. Here's the most haunting part. Just days before he died, Bon had written lyrics for a song called Have a Drink on Me. The lyrics? A perfect prediction of his own fate. But Bon's story didn't end there. AC/DC decided to move forward. They released Back in Black, a tribute to their fallen singer. It became one of the biggest rock albums of all time. Bon Scott never got to see it.
Look at me!
But his voice, his attitude, they're immortal. 18. Scott Weiland. Scott Weiland had a voice that could shake stadiums, but behind the scenes, he was fighting demons no one could silence. His talent made him a legend. His addiction made him a tragedy. As the frontman of Stone Temple Pilots and Velvet Revolver, Weiland helped define 90s rock. His stage presence was electrifying, his voice raw and hypnotic. But fame came with a price: drugs, alcohol, and self-destruction. His bandmates saw it coming.
Hi, Kurt. I'm Scott Weiland. I sing for a band sometimes called STP.
It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, one said. By the mid-2000s, Weiland had been fired from 2 major bands, arrested multiple times, and lost his family. But the worst was yet to come. On December 3, 2015, Weiland's tour bus became his coffin. His lifeless body was found in his sleep. The cause? A toxic mix of drugs, alcohol, and years of abuse. He was just 48 years old. And here's the part that hurts the most. His bandmates admitted they weren't shocked. They had been waiting for this moment for years. The man who once screamed into the microphone with unrelenting passion died in complete silence. Scott Weiland didn't just sing about pain, he lived it. 17. Layne Staley. Layne Staley had a voice like no other. Haunting, powerful, unforgettable. But his real story? Even darker than his lyrics. As the frontman of Alice in Chains, Staley gave the world songs about addiction, depression, and loneliness. But those weren't just songs. They were his reality. By the late 90s, he had vanished from the public eye. Friends barely saw him. His band had fallen apart. And rumors spread that he was wasting away in isolation. Then came the worst part. On April 5th, 2002, police found his body in his apartment. The most chilling detail? He had been dead for 2 weeks. No one had noticed. No calls, no visitors, just silence. His body was discovered on April 19th, almost exactly 8 years after Kurt Cobain's death. Coincidence? Maybe, but some believe he had been waiting for that day. Staley once said, "I know I'm near death, I'm just done." And he was right. A rock god, forgotten by the world before he was even gone. Layne Staley didn't just write about loneliness, he died in it. 16. Dimebag Darrell. Dimebag Darrell survived the wildest days of heavy metal, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. He wasn't just a legendary guitarist, he was one of the most beloved figures in metal. But on one tragic night in 2004, his life was stolen in the most horrifying way possible. As the guitarist for Pantera and Damageplan, Dimebag revolutionized metal with his razor-sharp riffs and explosive stage presence. Fans adored him. Fellow musicians respected him, and his influence stretched across generations. But on December 8, 2004, a deranged fan stormed the stage during a Damageplan concert in Ohio. Before anyone could react, he pulled out a gun and shot Dimebag Darrell multiple times right in front of a live audience. Fans screamed. The band froze. The nightmare unfolded in seconds. Security tackled the shooter, but it was too late. Dimebag was dead at 38 years old. Here's the most chilling part. The shooter, Nathan Gale, believed Pantera had stolen his songs. He had paranoid delusions and had planned the attack for months. Dimebag was one of the greatest guitarists of his generation, and he died doing what he loved most, playing on stage. But no one could have imagined his final show would end in murder. A legend lost, a stage stained with tragedy, and a night metal fans will never forget. 15. Chester Bennington. Chester Bennington had everything: a family, a career, millions of fans. But behind the success, he was fighting battles no one could see. And on July 20th, 2017, the world woke up to a nightmare. As the frontman of Linkin Park, Chester's voice defined an entire generation. He screamed, he sang, he connected. Fans felt his pain through every lyric, but his past was filled with deep scars, childhood trauma, addiction, and depression. His close friend Chris Cornell was one of the few people who truly understood his struggles. When Chris took his own life on May 18, 2017, Chester was devastated. Then, just 2 months later, on what would have been Cornell's 53rd birthday, Chester was found dead at his home. The cause? Suicide. Coincidence? Maybe. But many believe Chester's death was his way of following his best friend. Two legends gone within months. His bandmates were shattered. Fans were left in disbelief. And here's the detail that makes it even more heartbreaking. Chester had just filmed an episode of Carpool Karaoke days before his death. He was laughing, smiling, full of energy. No one saw it coming. The voice that once roared with power was silenced forever. Chester Bennington sang about pain, but in the end, his own pain won. 14. Chris Cornell. Chris Cornell had one of the most powerful voices in rock history, but no one knew that behind the soaring vocals, he was battling a storm he couldn't escape. On May 18, 2017, just hours after a performance, that storm finally consumed him. As the frontman of Soundgarden and Audioslave, Cornell was a legend. His voice could go from a deep, haunting whisper to an earth-shattering scream in seconds. He wasn't just a singer, he was an experience. But his personal life was filled with struggles, depression, addiction, and a relentless inner darkness. After finishing a concert in Detroit, he returned to his hotel room. Something felt off. His wife even noticed it in his voice during a phone call. Then, silence. Just hours later, he was found dead. The cause? Suicide. But here's where things get even stranger. Chris was on an anti-anxiety medication that can cause suicidal thoughts. His family believes this wasn't intentional, that something went wrong that night. And then came the final heartbreak. His best friend, Chester Bennington, took his own life just 2 months later on what would have been Chris's 53rd birthday. Two rock legends, two devastating suicides, connected by fate, or something even darker. Cornell once sang, "No one sings like you anymore," and after his death, those words have never felt more true. 13. Jeff Buckley. Jeff Buckley's voice was otherworldly, angelic, haunting, and utterly unique.
The rain fall upon the funeral mourner.
He had everything a musician could dream of, and then one night in 1997, he walked into a river and never came back. Buckley wasn't just talented, he was once-in-a-generation special. His cover of Hallelujah is still considered one of the greatest vocal performances of all time. His debut album, Grace, was critically acclaimed, and his future seemed limitless. Then, on May 29, 1997, everything changed. Jeff Buckley, fully clothed, walked into the Mississippi River and started swimming. His bandmates warned him about the dangerous current, but he waved them off. He was smiling, laughing. Then he vanished. Search teams scoured the river for days. 5 days later, his body was found. No drugs, no alcohol, no warning signs. Just a man who walked into the water and never walked out. Some believe it was a tragic accident. Others think it was something more. Was Jeff Buckley at peace, or was he hiding something? The eeriest part? He had written a song called Dream Brother, warning a friend not to abandon his child. And in the end, that's exactly what he did. Jeff Buckley didn't die in a hotel room. He didn't overdose. He didn't burn out. He simply disappeared, leaving behind one of the greatest what-if stories in rock history. 12. Cliff Burton. Cliff Burton was the soul of Metallica. His bass solos were unlike anything the world had heard before. Fast, intricate, and mind-blowing. But one split-second decision sealed his fate forever. At just 24, Cliff was already a metal legend. His playing on Master of Puppets redefined what a bassist could do in a metal band. Fans worshipped him. Bandmates relied on him. He was unstoppable. But on September 27, 1986, everything changed. Metallica was on tour in Sweden when their tour bus hit a patch of ice and flipped over. Most of the band crawled out, injured but alive. But Cliff? He was thrown from his bunk and crushed under the bus. Here's the craziest part. The band had drawn playing cards the night before to decide who got to sleep in the best bunk. Cliff won. That bunk cost him his life. And the story doesn't end there. When they tried to lift the bus off him, it slipped again, crushing him a second time. It was as if fate had decided that Cliff Burton's time was up. Metallica was never the same. His death changed them, their music, their souls. And to this day, fans wonder, what if Cliff had lived? One lucky card, one terrible night, and a legend lost forever. 11. Randy Rhoads. Randy Rhoads was supposed to be the next guitar god. His solos were fast, technical, and breathtaking. But one reckless stunt took it all away in the blink of an eye. At just 25, Rhoads was already a guitar genius. He played with Ozzy Osbourne, and his classical-influenced shredding made him one of the most exciting musicians of his time. But March 19, 1982 changed everything. While on tour, Randy and some crew members hopped into a small plane for fun. The pilot, a tour bus driver with no proper license, thought it would be funny to fly dangerously close to the band's tour bus. It wasn't funny, it was deadly. The plane clipped the bus, spiraled out of control, and crashed into a house. It exploded on impact. Randy Rhoads was gone. Here's the most heartbreaking part. Randy hated partying. While the rest of the band got drunk, he studied guitar. He wasn't reckless. He was disciplined. But in the end, someone else's recklessness cost him his life. Ozzy Osbourne never recovered. He still calls Randy his greatest musical partner. One moment he was a rising legend. The next, a memory. And the worst part? He never even got to see how big his legacy would become. 10. John Bonham. John Bonham wasn't just a drummer, he was a force of nature. His drumming in Led Zeppelin wasn't just heard, it was felt. Every thunderous beat, every rapid-fire solo, he made the drums a lead instrument. But his own recklessness led to an ending no one saw coming. Bonham was known for his wild energy both on and off the stage. He was a party legend, drinking harder than anyone else in the room, but no one thought it would kill him. On September 24, 1980, during rehearsals for an upcoming Led Zeppelin tour, Bonham started drinking. By the end of the night, he had consumed over 40 shots of vodka. Bandmates helped him to bed thinking he'd sleep it off. By morning, he was gone. Bonham had choked on his own vomit in his sleep, just like AC/DC's Bon Scott. The man whose drumming sounded like an earthquake was suddenly silent. And here's the moment that shook rock history. With Bonham gone, Led Zeppelin broke up. No replacements, no reunion, just done. Because without Bonham, Zeppelin wasn't Zeppelin. His death wasn't just the loss of a drummer, it was the end of an era. What if he had survived? Would Zeppelin still rule the rock world today? 9. Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley wasn't just the king of rock and roll. He was the king, period. His voice, his style, his swagger, untouchable. But behind the fame was a man falling apart. By the late 70s, Elvis wasn't Elvis anymore.
Elvis Presley died today. He was 42. Apparently it was a heart attack.
Years of drugs, prescription pills, and a dangerous lifestyle had turned him into a shadow of his former self. But no one expected what happened next. On August 16, 1977 at Graceland, Elvis's fiancée found him collapsed on the bathroom floor. He had suffered a massive heart attack. But here's where things get dark. The official cause of death? Heart failure. The real cause? A toxic mix of at least 14 different drugs.
On Elvis Presley Boulevard in Memphis, the world is shocked by Elvis Presley's sudden death after...
And the most disturbing part? Elvis had been obsessed with death. He once told friends he feared dying like his mother. He read books on spirituality, tried strange diets, and became increasingly paranoid. Was it just a tragic overdose, or did the king see his own fate coming? Even now, some refuse to believe he's really gone. The Elvis sightings, the conspiracy theories, the claims that he faked his death, they've never stopped. Because let's be honest, can the king of rock and roll ever truly die? 8. Freddie Mercury. Freddie Mercury wasn't just a singer, he was a phenomenon. His voice was unmatched, his stage presence electric, and his ability to hold an audience in the palm of his hand? Unreal. But behind the dazzling performances was a secret that would change everything. By the late 80s, something was wrong. Fans noticed Freddie had lost weight, looked tired, and had stopped touring altogether.
Going public with the news that he had AIDS. In recent weeks, there was talk that the lead singer of the group Queen...
Rumors swirled. Was he sick? Was it AIDS? Freddie denied everything. He kept recording, kept creating, and in 1991, Queen released Innuendo. It was filled with farewell messages hidden in lyrics, but no one fully understood. Then, on November 23, 1991, Freddie Mercury made a shocking announcement. He had AIDS. Just 24 hours later, he was dead. The world was in shock. One of the greatest voices gone. The disease that no one dared talk about had stolen a legend. But here's the part that makes it even more heartbreaking. Freddie had known for years. He kept it secret to protect Queen, his family, his fans. Instead of pity, he wanted to be remembered for his music. And he got his wish. Bohemian Rhapsody, We Will Rock You, Somebody to Love. His songs still live forever. Freddie Mercury left the world too soon, but his voice? That's never dying. 7. Brian Jones. Brian Jones was the real founder of the Rolling Stones. Before Mick Jagger and Keith Richards took over, he was the band's heart and soul. But by 1969, he wasn't just out of the band, he was about to be out of time. Jones was a musical genius. He could play over 60 instruments. He was experimental, creative, ahead of his time, but he was also self-destructive. Drugs and alcohol took over his life. He became unreliable, missing rehearsals, forgetting lyrics. The band had no choice. He was fired. Just 1 month later, on July 3, 1969, Brian was found floating face down in his swimming pool. Official cause? Drowning while intoxicated. But here's where it gets weird. People don't believe it was an accident. Witnesses claim there was a fight that night. Some say his contractor murdered him. Others believe the Rolling Stones knew more than they let on. And the biggest mystery? Jones died at 27 years old, just like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, and Kurt Cobain. The 27 Club. Coincidence or something darker? The man who started the Rolling Stones didn't live to see their greatest success, but his influence, still undeniable. 6. Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison wasn't just a rock star. He was a myth, a poet, a madman on stage. He lived like he was untouchable, but in 1971, his demons caught up with him in the most mysterious way possible.
Jim, application.
As the frontman of The Doors, Morrison was larger than life. His deep hypnotic voice, wild stage presence, and rebellious spirit made him a legend. But behind the swagger was a man falling apart. Drugs, alcohol, and a fascination with death and the afterlife consumed him. His performances became unpredictable. His health started to fail, and his mind seemed somewhere else. Then, on July 3rd, 1971, Morrison's girlfriend found him dead in a bathtub in their Paris apartment. Official cause? Heart failure. But here's the thing. No autopsy was ever performed. Some claim he overdosed at a nightclub and his body was moved to the apartment to cover it up. Others believed he faked his death and disappeared. His last words? Still unknown. His body? Buried in a simple grave in Paris. And here's the eerie part. Jim Morrison died at 27, just like Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, and Janis Joplin. The 27 Club strikes again. Did Jim Morrison die of addiction? Was he murdered? Or did he vanish into legend just like he always wanted? 5. Janis Joplin. Janis Joplin's voice was fire, raw emotion, pure heartbreak. She didn't just sing the blues, she lived them. But just as she was reaching the peak of her career, everything came to a tragic and lonely end. Joplin wasn't like other singers. She felt every word, every note. Her performances weren't just concerts, they were explosions of the soul. But with fame came isolation, addiction, and self-destruction. She hated being alone. She feared dying without love. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. On October 4th, 1970, Joplin was found dead in her hotel room. Cause of death? A heroin overdose. But the most heartbreaking part? She had been out with friends just hours before, laughing, full of life. No one saw it coming. Here's where it gets chilling. Just 16 days earlier, Jimi Hendrix had died the exact same way. And yes, she was 27 years old. Her final recording? A song called Buried Alive in the Blues. She never finished it. Janis Joplin was bold, fearless, larger than life. But in the end, she died alone in a hotel room. Was it fate? The price of fame? Or was she always destined to burn out too soon? 4. Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix didn't just play guitar, he redefined what a guitar could do. His solos were electric, his performances legendary, and his influence unmatched. But on September 18, 1970, at just 27 years old, his story came to an abrupt, tragic end. Hendrix was a rock god. Faster, louder, more innovative than anyone before him. Songs like Purple Haze and Voodoo Child turned him into a global icon. But fame came with a price. Behind the scenes, Hendrix was exhausted, paranoid, and increasingly reckless. He partied hard, but insiders say he was also frightened, afraid of the industry, afraid of betrayal, afraid of something no one understood. Then, on that September morning, he was found unresponsive in a London hotel room. The official cause? Asphyxiation from choking on his own vomit. But here's where things get weird. There were 9 sleeping pills in his system, way over the normal dose, and some believe he didn't take them willingly. One theory? His manager had him killed. Hendrix had been trying to escape his record contract, and just weeks before his death, he told friends he was being watched. And of course, he was 27, another member of the infamous 27 Club. Did Hendrix overdose? Was he murdered? Or did the music industry silence its most brilliant mind before he could break free? One thing's for sure, his guitar still screams even in death. 3. Kurt Cobain. Kurt Cobain didn't want to be a rock star, but he became the face of an entire generation. His music spoke to the lost, the broken, the misfits. And in 1994, his life ended in the most controversial way possible. As Nirvana's frontman, Cobain changed rock music forever. Smells Like Teen Spirit wasn't just a song, it was a movement. But Kurt hated fame. The pressure, the attention, the expectations, it crushed him. He struggled with addiction, depression, and a feeling that he didn't belong. Then, on April 8, 1994, his body was found at his Seattle home. A shotgun, a suicide note, and a toxic level of heroin in his system. But here's where the controversy explodes. Some believe he didn't pull the trigger. The shotgun had no fingerprints. The amount of heroin in his blood was so high, experts say he couldn't have physically fired the gun. And then there's Courtney Love, his wife, his biggest supporter, or something else. Some claim she hired a hitman. Others say Kurt had been planning his escape from the industry and was silenced. The final words of his note? It's better to burn out than to fade away. Suicide or murder? The debate still rages. But one thing is clear. Kurt Cobain never wanted to be a legend. And yet, in death, he became one. 2. Buddy Holly. Buddy Holly was supposed to be rock's future. His music was fresh, fast, and completely ahead of its time. But on February 3rd, 1959, he boarded a plane and never made it home. At just 22 years old, Holly had already changed the game. Songs like Peggy Sue and That'll Be the Day turned him into a rock pioneer. His glasses, his voice, his sound. Iconic. But fame came with brutal touring schedules. In the winter of 1959, Holly was stuck on a broken-down tour bus in freezing weather. He was done with it. So for one night, he decided to skip the bus and fly instead. The worst decision of his life. The plane took off, flew into a snowstorm, and crashed minutes later. No survivors. And here's the craziest part. Holly wasn't even supposed to be on that flight. He had flipped a coin with Waylon Jennings for the last seat. Holly won the coin toss. Jennings won his life. The crash also took Ritchie Valens, who sang La Bamba, and the Big Bopper. It was so shocking it became known as the day the music died. Buddy Holly never got to see how big rock and roll would become, but his music, it shaped everything. Would rock have been different if he had lived? Absolutely. 1. John Lennon. John Lennon was more than a rock star. He was a symbol of rebellion, of peace, of everything music could mean. But on December 8th, 1980, he was gunned down in cold blood. As a Beatle, Lennon changed the world. Imagine became an anthem for peace. His message? Love over war. But one man didn't see it that way. Mark David Chapman was a fan, obsessed. He wanted to be John Lennon. But in his twisted mind, the only way to achieve that was to kill him. Earlier that day, Chapman had asked Lennon for an autograph. Lennon smiled, signed his album, and walked away. Hours later, as Lennon returned home to the Dakota Building, Chapman was waiting. 5 bullets. 4 hit their target. Lennon collapsed in Yoko Ono's arms. His final words? I'm shot. The world froze. The man who preached peace was taken by violence. Fans wept in the streets. Even radio stations stopped playing music. Chapman didn't run. He just sat there reading a copy of The Catcher in the Rye. His reason? I wanted to be famous. John Lennon's murder wasn't just tragic, it was senseless. A moment that robbed the world of its voice. Even now, people ask, why? What if he had lived? What more could he have given us? One bullet ended a life. But John Lennon's music? It will never die. So now I ask you, which rock star's death shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more untold stories from the world of music, hit that subscribe button, because trust me, we've got some insane stories coming up. See you in the next one.